They say the desert forgets nothing. Not footsteps, not bones, not the stories buried beneath the dust. Some places aren't found on maps, they're found in old journals, whispered warnings, scars left in stone. And every now and then, someone goes looking for what should have stayed lost. Welcome to Dust and Echoes, a podcast about forgotten places, half-buried truths, and the mistakes that echo across time. I'm James Cawley. If you're the kind of person who loves strange history, lost roads, and stories that blur the line between fact and folklore, you're in the right place. I've got a new one for you every week. So let's take a walk, together, out past the last gas station, past the broken trail markers, deep into the kind of place where history was never written down. This week, we head to the southwest, a canyon older than memory, a journal no one believed, and a secret buried in stone. I call this one a library in the desert. The maps lied, all of them. Ben Whitlock had spent most of his adult life crawling across deserts with crumpled topo quads and hand-marked GPS grids like a gambler chasing one more roll. But here, in this stretch of land that belonged to no one but itself, paper and pixels both gave out. There was no trail, no cairn, no natural line a human being was meant to follow. Only rock, broken and sun-baked, folding in on itself like a secret never meant to be shared. The four corners had teeth. They didn't show them at first. Not to the tourists in air-conditioned Subarus counting hoodoos like holy relics. But if you stayed long enough, if you walked far enough, the land began to change. The silence stopped being pretty. The heat wasn't just hot. And the sky, that stupidly big sky, began to feel like it was watching. Ben set down his pack and leaned on his trekking pole, breathing through his teeth. 68 years old and hauling 70 pounds of gear through sun-baked canyons like it was some kind of pilgrimage. His legs ached, his reconstructed hip throbbed, and his left foot, the one with the radiation-burned tendons, was making a sound in his boot like old rope twisting in wind. He grinned through the sweat. "Still alive, you bastard," he muttered to himself. Still walking. 30 years ago, he'd found the journal in a museum basement in Mexico City. A worn leather folio, misfiled between colonial shipping records and trade inventories, tucked into a box that hadn't been opened since the 1930s. It bore the wax seal of a Jesuit mission long since consumed by the jungle. Inside, a record from 1691, handwritten in Castilian Spanish. Father Esteban de la Cruz. The good padre had accompanied a sanctioned colonial expedition northward into the land of the heathen tribes. A band of soldiers, translators, 2 Franciscans, and a pair of local conscripts with eyes like sharpened flint. The journal, meticulously penned in thick black ink, described their journey into the desert in search of una biblioteca de los salvajes, a library of the savages. A ridiculous phrase, likely metaphor, except it wasn't. Ben had spent the last 3 decades proving it wasn't. The entry that had lit the match burned behind his eyes even now. We came to a place where the canyons bent like the moon, a narrow crescent in the land. There, looking down from the high rim, we saw a gathering of painted men in hides of the lion. They bore black and red pigment, masked in death. They carried books, real books, bound in hide. They wrote in a flowing script as if possessed. This devil's literacy chilled us. We called out. They did not turn. One of the soldiers raised his musket. I stayed him. We had no ropes to descend. The next day we built a ladder of juniper and went back to descend and purge them. But we were met by death. Darts, silent, curved, and swift, fell 2 of our men. One through the eye, another through the throat. Not war, execution. The rest of us fled. I burned my cassock that night. That was the only known account. No known follow-up expedition. No mention in Franciscan archives. Just whispers of a place seen once, then lost. A place that didn't belong in any accepted history of the region. A canyon with writing, books, ceremony, a library. Ben had been 28 when he found it. Now he was 68. In between 2 marriages, no kids, 30 years at the University of New Mexico, a slow academic suicide by peer-reviewed paper, and one very unexpected stage 4 diagnosis that turned his life into a waiting room. He wasn't supposed to be here. Hell, he wasn't supposed to be anywhere. The cancer had taken his prostate, most of his hair, and all of his patience. But it hadn't taken this chase. This old, beautiful, stupid chase. His camp that night was dry and silent. He pitched it in the crook of 2 massive boulders tucked out of the wind. His gear was stripped to the essentials. Ultralight tent. Garmin with the SOS beacon feature. Titanium cookware, rope, and his multi-tool. And in the bottom of his pack, wrapped in wax cloth, a hand-bound facsimile of the priest's journal, annotated in Ben's own cramped hand. He lay on his back outside the tent that night, looking up at the stars. "How the hell did you get here, Whitlock?" he asked the sky. But he knew he wasn't chasing a legend. He was chasing a question. What if the story wasn't just true? What if the story was proof? Proof that the people who lived here long before the Spaniards, before the borders, before the missionaries and the archaeologists in the strip malls had not just survived, not just endured, but written. And maybe we had burned it down because it looked too much like us. He fell asleep to the sound of stone cooling under moonlight. Tomorrow he'd descend into the Crescent Canyon. Tomorrow he'd find the truth. Or he wouldn't come back out. It took half a day to reach the rim. Ben moved slow, not from weakness, though his bones protested every incline, but from reverence, or maybe caution. Like a man walking into a church carved from time, where the pews were stone and the altar had been there long before any god was named. The canyon did not reveal itself with grandeur. No thunderclap vista, no cinematic reveal. It unfolded instead like a scar, narrow and mean, half choked with shadow even in the mid-morning sun. A crescent cleft in the plateau, unnatural in its precision, like some giant had taken a knife to the land and carved out a secret. Ben stood at its rim and did not speak. Not for a long time. He pulled out the facsimile of the Jesuit Journal, found the page with the sketch, a crude drawing of a curving canyon, flanked by 2 weather-bent monoliths. He looked up. The stones were there, weathered now, like hunched guardians. But they matched. He folded the page back, slipped it inside his coat, and whispered, 30 years. The wind answered, dry and sharp, like old bones knocking together. The way down was no way at all. There was no path, no switchback, no chain or ladder bolted by thrill seekers or forest rangers. This wasn't a place meant for human feet anymore, if it ever had been. Ben studied the slope for 20 minutes, moving his eyes like a scanner. There. An old game trail, maybe. A series of ledges no wider than his boot, winding down like broken stairs. It was either that or rig a rope and rappel, and his shoulder hadn't forgiven him for the last time he tried that nonsense. He went slow, painfully slow. Each step was a calculation, every handhold tested. His mind whispered the worst, a missed step, a broken femur, his body lying in the canyon like so many others who had thought they were meant to find something. But he reached the bottom, boots touched soil. The air changed immediately, cool, still, like breathing inside a sealed tomb. The walls rose around him like cathedral pillars, rust-colored and streaked with soot and mineral memory. High above, a ribbon of sky split the rock like a scar. Thin, blue, eternal. And here, in the crescent heart of the world, Ben stopped being a man on a quest. He became a trespasser. He walked deeper. The floor of the canyon was not smooth. It buckled and coiled, broken by dry washes and tumbled boulders. The walls seemed to pulse closer with every step, though he knew it was just the narrowing rock. The light dimmed. Shadows lengthened. And then, impossibly, he saw it. Not a ruin. Not a temple. A threshold. An arch of stacked stone so precisely placed that it could not have been natural. Time had bowed it inward, but it still stood. Beyond it, a small shelf of stone jutted from the canyon wall. Above the shelf, a seam. A dark wound cut horizontally, maybe 6 feet high, 10 wide. A cave. No, more than a cave. An entrance. Ben's heart quickened. His boots crunched over ancient dust. He ducked low, entered. Inside it was cold. Not just cool. Cold. The kind of cold that hadn't been touched by sun in centuries. He flicked on his headlamp. The beam swept across walls of carved sandstone. At first nothing. Then he saw them. Symbols. Lines etched with stone tools, burned with soot and pigment. Not graffiti, not decoration. They repeated. They formed patterns. There was syntax here. A language. Ben's breath caught in his throat. He stepped forward, trailing fingers along the wall. A flicker. Movement? No, just his own reflection in the glossy mineral sheen. Then something caught his boot. He looked down. A bone. Small. Human. A child. He froze, not fear, not yet. Grief. He knelt. The remains had been arranged, not haphazard. Intentional. Wrapped in strips of some long decayed textile. Curled into a fetal position, a burial. Reverent. Ben lowered his head. "Forgive me," he whispered. He moved deeper, careful now not to disturb anything. The cave bent right, then dropped slightly. And then, in the beam of his headlamp, it appeared. A wall, concave and smooth, with rows, actual rows of shelf-like recesses. Most were empty. But in the center row, 3 objects remained, stacked, wrapped in hide, edges burned dark from time. He staggered forward, heart pounding. Books, they were real. He didn't touch them, not yet. He sat. Right there, on the cave floor, cross-legged like a child, and he wept. He wept for time, for the decades lost chasing this dream. He wept for the arrogance it had taken to think he could find it, for the hubris that assumed it needed to be found. They had been here all along, writing, recording, remembering, while his ancestors came with fire and crosses and science to tear it all down. He saw it now. Not just in the stone, not just in the pages, but in himself. The library had never needed to be proven. It only needed to be left alone. It happened on the way out. Maybe that was the price. Ben had packed his bag slow, hands reverent. He'd touched the walls of the library like the ribs of a sleeping god. He left the books as they were, recorded only what memory could carry. And when he stepped back out into the canyon's throat, he felt something inside him loosen. Something heavy that had lived there a long, long time. But the canyon wasn't done with him. Not yet. The ledge collapsed beneath his left boot. Just a sliver of sandstone, sun-dried and hollowed by time. His weight shifted, his body twisted, and then he fell. Not far. Just wrong. His shin struck the rock like a war drum, a wet, bright snap, the kind of sound you don't forget, because it comes from inside. Pain roared through him like fire on the wind. He screamed. rolled, landed face first in dust and blood. The world blurred. Time folded. Ben stared at his leg. The bone jutted like a splinter through his skin, white and shining with meat. Blood ran fast, pulsing. He clutched it with both hands, fingers slipping, teeth clenched so hard he could taste enamel dust. He fumbled his belt, cinched it above the wound, a tourniquet, crude, tight. It wasn't enough. He needed help. He needed sky. His garment in reach buzzed dimly in his pack. He pulled it out with shaking hands. The screen blinked to life. He thumbed the ACE OS. No satellite connection. Please move outside or away from cover. The canyon walls soared above him like closing hands. He laughed, wild and empty. Then came the sound. Low. Animal. Older than language. A growl. Ben turned, heart stuttering in his chest. At the mouth of the narrow bend, yellow eyes, a mountain lion. She stood like a statue carved from silence, her coat the same color as the rock. Behind her, smaller eyes blinked, a cub. Ben whispered, "Shit." He tried to move. Pain exploded through his body. The leg, wrong, too wrong. The cub padded forward, curious. Ben kicked at it weakly. Too late. It licked the blood on his leg, then bit. The scream echoed through the canyon. He struck with the only thing he had, his multi-tool still clipped to his belt, opened it with bloody fingers, drove the blade into the cub's eye. It collapsed, twitching. The mother lion did not roar. She watched, expressionless, terrible. She was not mourning. She was learning him. Ben crawled with the spear he made from a tent pole. With the GPS clutched like a dying star in his palm, he crawled deeper into the canyon, backwards, into myth, into fear, into the trial that every old hunter deserves. Every inch tore skin. The rocks shredded his palms. The wind mocked him, and always behind. Her. He heard her pads against the stone, saw her shadow stretching behind each curve. Sometimes when he stopped to breathe, he swore she was watching from just out of reach, like she wanted him to bleed a little more, like this was a story she'd seen before. Then the canyon narrowed. A slot. Barely wide enough to squeeze, no open sky, no signal. Ben wept, not from pain, from knowing. He had failed. He had come too far for knowledge, too deep for permission, and now the land would bury him like it buried the last ones. But then, above, a slice of night. Stars, just a handful. A crack of light. It might be enough. Ben reached, pulled himself up the wall. His muscles screamed. His wound throbbed like a second heart. He rose. And there, signal. The Garmin beeped. Satellite connection acquired. He hit the SOS again. It blinked. Message sent, awaiting response. He collapsed. The lion, it came in the shadows, in the dark. She moved like a blade in the dark. Quiet. Sure. He turned, saw her silhouette on the ledge above. She crouched. Ready. He raised his spear, tent pole, duct tape, knife, held it across his chest. When she leapt, he didn't scream. He just braced. The point struck true. The weight of her drove the blade into her own heart. She landed on top of him, heaving once, then still. Her breath smelled like blood and dust. Ben whispered, "I'm sorry." She blinked once. Then her eyes dimmed. The stars above him didn't blink. They watched. And for the first time, Ben understood. This wasn't a death. It was a baptism. It was almost peaceful, pinned beneath the weight of the lion, its blood soaking into him, mixing with his own, their warmth already leaving. Ben let the world blur. The canyon above was a narrow rib of sky. No wind, no bird song. Just the sound of his own ragged breath, and the quiet settling of the guardian who had nearly ended him. He couldn't move, couldn't feel his leg anymore, just the cold and the tightness in his chest. His body was done, shut down, going inward. He tried to lift his arm once. It flopped against the lion's ribcage with a wet smack. He chuckled. It sounded like sand being stirred with a knife. "So this is how it ends," he muttered. "Anthropologist dies cuddling predator. Real poetic shit, Whitlock." His head lolled to one side, his cheek sticking to the bloody dust. His left eye caught a glimpse of the wall, of the slot canyon twisting away in both directions, a stone throat neither light nor history would ever escape cleanly. And in that wall, he saw something that made him want to cry again. A petroglyph, faint, half erased by time, but he could still make it out. A spiral flanked by two sets of eyes, a figure holding something, a circle, a mirror. He laughed again, dry this time, hollow. "Someone will find us," he said. But the word "us" felt dirty, not because of the cat, because he knew what they'd say. 100 years from now, maybe less, some grad student would come across this skeleton mess, man and lion entwined in death, and they'd invent a story. Maybe something romantic, symbolic, or worse, something academically neat. A paper, a theory, a TED Talk, and he would know, even in death, what a lie it all was. He'd done that once. Connected dots not because they belonged, but because they got funding. That was the real dig, the real pit, and he'd spent a lifetime in it. Ben closed his eyes. "I see it now," he whispered, voice cracking. He wasn't here to prove anything. He was here to witness. That was the difference. He would have given anything to realize it sooner. But maybe the last stair still counts, even if you fall off it. Then, movement. Not in the canyon, in the sky. Just at the corner of his vision, a flicker. Too high to see if you look directly, but in the blur, in the edges. A satellite, sliding fast across the narrow window of sky. A man-made comet, bridging stars and stone. Ben's breath caught. His blood-caked hand fumbled at his side. The Garmin. Somehow it had been knocked free. It lay just inches from his broken fingers, half buried in blood and gravel. Not his blood. The lion's. Ben reached, fumbled. Claws of pain ripped up his spine. He gritted his teeth, dragged it toward him. The screen flickered. No connection. The satellite was moving, closing the gap. Ben braced the device against the sandstone, pressed the SOS button. His fingers slipped. Blood smeared the glass. Missed. The arc of the satellite was halfway now, almost gone. He screamed through clenched teeth, tried again, pressed hard. Nothing. He cursed, cried, pressed harder. "Please." Blood roared in his ears. The stars blinked once. He froze, looked down. SOS alert. Sent. "Help is on the way to your location." Ben smiled. A stupid, cracked child smile. Like the day his doctor said, "It's gone." That same breathless joy. He mouthed the words, "Still here." Then let go. The sky spun. His body sagged under the mountain lion's weight, and he passed out beneath the canyon's breath. He told them it was a mountain lion, a backcountry trek gone wrong. Bad trail, no signal, an ambush at dusk. He kept the details neat, vague enough to be true, bloody enough to be convincing. The rescue team believed him. So did the rangers and the hospital staff and the local news when they caught wind of the professor who survived the canyon. A few interviews. A quiet flood of sympathy. He brushed it off. Told them he just wanted to recover and get back to writing. No one ever asked the right question, so he never gave them the real answer. He never spoke of the cave, or the books, or the way the canyon watched him. Some stories are not his to tell. Time passed. Seasons changed shape. The scars on his body hardened and faded. The limp softened into a slow, dignified stride. His name drifted from lecture halls and symposiums. He let it. His life's work was forgotten, at least by those who scribble in grant margins and peer-reviewed tombs. But something else remained, a quietness, a sense of things being in their right places, and a respect for the ones who had always known where those places were. It was years later when the dream returned, not the nightmare. He'd long since stopped waking up gasping, feeling fur and teeth and breath. No, this was different. Just the cave again. Still. Silent. Books untouched. Dust rising from an invisible hand, turning pages that were not his to read. When he woke that morning, he knew it was time. The village was older than the roads that reached it. Adobe homes baked in centuries of sun. Red earth under bare feet. Children running between old trees with secrets in their roots. Ben sat on a bench outside a low-plastered building near the central plaza. The air smelled of creosote, ash, and roasted corn. She arrived quietly, as he imagined she would. A woman in her 40s, maybe older, though her face was carved in that ageless way some desert women wear time, more like a partnership than a burden. She introduced herself simply, Leah, cultural historian of her pueblo. She did not smile much, but she listened with eyes like still water. He told her everything, from the beginning. The Jesuit Journal, the years of searching, the cave, the glyphs, the books, the lion, the silence. It spilled from him like confession, like blood, like something that had waited too long. When he finished, he looked down at his hands. "I feel like I had to get the weight off my chest," he said. "Even if it means nothing now. Even if no one believes it." Leah didn't speak for a while. Then she looked past him, out to the plaza where children played, where the hills rolled like old shoulders beyond. "We know of this place," she said simply. He looked up, startled. Her expression didn't change. "This is a special place," she said. "It was not meant for you, but you were allowed to enter, and you made the right choice." She reached out then, gently rolled up the sleeve of his shirt. Her fingers found the long, ragged scar on his forearm, where the guardian had marked him. She ran her hand over it like reading a story in Braille. "You have done well," she said. "You are a brother now to the Haktadasha." Ben swallowed hard. "What does that mean?" Her eyes lifted to the sky. Mountain lion, the long-tail spirit of the canyon, hunter between worlds. Then softer. "You have escaped death, more than once, but only by his choice." Ben closed his eyes. The warmth of the sun touched his face like the breath of something vast and old. He didn't need to say anything else. Some truths don't ask to be spoken. They just ask to be carried well. The end. That was A Library in the Desert, written and performed by the author. Me, James Cawley. A story about footprints in forgotten places. About a man who went looking for proof, and instead found permission. About the difference between conquering and witnessing, and the quiet weight of knowing when a story doesn't belong to you. It belongs to the stone, the silence, and the ones who were here long before we ever arrived. In the end, Ben Whitlock didn't return with treasure. He came back with a scar, a silence, and a truth carried like a flame cupped in both hands. If that kind of story speaks to you, you're in the right place. Because there's plenty more where that came from. I release a brand new story every single week, each one drawn from history, with blind spots, dusty margins, and sacred echoes. Be sure to subscribe to Dust and Echoes wherever you get your podcasts. And hey, if you like this story, please leave a comment and rating. I'd appreciate it. It helps more than you know. If you want to see what stories I have coming next, visit my website, enterthedust.com. You'll find teasers, behind the scenes, content, and you can even support the channel by purchasing a paperback book edition of one of my stories. Until next time, walk softly, listen deeply, and keep this in mind. Not everything buried is gone. Some stories are still here, hiding in the dust, just waiting for one of us to remember.